Amity! You just lost us a lot of money.
Cartoons are one of the most popular forms of entertainment for children all over the world. But there's a heartbreaking truth that you need to be aware of. At least 1 in 7 children have experienced child abuse or neglect in the past year in the United States. It's a problem millions of children are struggling with. Many of them are unheard and ignored. Many children never get the help they need. It's even common for victims of child abuse to not be aware that they are being abused. This brings me to the topic of this video. Let's talk about child abuse in the Owl House. Specifically, Amity Blight and her family. What Amity has endured all her life is literal child abuse. Her mother has always been emotionally manipulating her own children, with Amity being the victim of Odalia's complete control. The signs of abuse are very frequent in Amity along with Edric and Emira, because all the Blight children are victims of child abuse. The earliest signs of child abuse we see in the series is Amity's behavior in episode 3, I Was a Teenage Abomination. Amity was a bully, but what gives it away is how Amity acts when she loses her title as the top student. It clearly means a lot to her, and judging by how paranoid and angry she gets when she loses her golden star, it isn't because she values being the best, it's her parents that value her being the best. I'm not exactly sure how cruel Odalia and Alador are, but judging by how Amity behaved, coming home without her top student badge would lead to a punishment. Probably verbal abuse, but who knows what actually happened to her when she got home that day. In understanding Willow, after she gets accused of being Willow's former best friend, Amity says,
Amity, weren't you friends with Willow?
I'm a Blight. We only associate with a select few. Keep annoying me though. I'm happy to select fewer.
Oh, I could have sworn that you guys hung out.
And that's where things get really suspicious. Even later in the episode, we're shown that Amity got restricted from seeing her friends as a child just because they aren't wealthy and powerful. This is abuse. We get a strong insight about how child abuse makes Amity feel. Listen to what Amity says to Hunter in the episode Eclipse Lake.
You know, you were right. We do have a lot in common. I grew up thinking that everything was an opportunity to justify existing. But there are people out there who won't make you feel worthless. You just have to let yourself meet them.
By what she said, Amity is indicating that there were people in her life that did make her feel worthless. A common strategy for manipulation is to lower the victim's confidence and self-worth so much that they believe no one wants anything to do with them. So when the manipulator does give the victim any kind of positive attention, the victim will feel like it's the best they can get, and Amity is clearly recovering from this phenomenon. Throughout the show, I observed that Amity gets treated way more harshly than her 2 older siblings. Her expectations are much higher, and her freedom is greatly restricted. Amity is naturally not as talented as her siblings, which caused her to require working a lot harder than her classmates to reach the top. Emira and Edric get looser rules because they are in Odalia's image. This is represented in a few very clever ways. In the episode, Adventures in the Elements, the twins tease Amity by telling Luz that Amity still needs a training staff to learn new spells. By the way they say this, it indicates neither of them require a training staff, meaning they have bigger talents for magic and don't need extra accommodations like Amity does. My favorite representation that the twins fit Odalia's image more than Amity is about their hair colors. Both Edric and Emira have naturally green hair, just like Odalia, but with Amity on the other hand, she is a brunette, like her father. But Amity was forced to dye her hair green to fit her mother's image more precisely. That's also why Amity got so upset with Luz learning magic. To her, a human learning magic so quickly was a threat. Amity states she had to work so hard her entire life to get to the top, but Luz just stumbled upon the Boiling Isles and started learning magic without even having a bile sac. Emira and Edric are also victims of child abuse. They cope with it by being troublemakers and doing just whatever they want. But because of Amity being the golden child and the Blight child with the most attention from her parents, Amity is the one blamed for the twins' delinquency. Edric feels like he isn't good enough for anything. He takes any opportunity to help people to prove his worth.
You think I could help? Okay.
This behavior stems from the fact his parents never viewed his efforts as enough. Despite his talent with illusions, his parents still view him as less than his sisters, and it hurts his self-esteem drastically. All of his behaviors in reaching out display just how little he thinks of himself and his abilities. The Blight that isn't talked about enough is Emira. She is the odd one out of the Blight children because she seems to show very few signs of being miserable, but that's just because of her role to her siblings. Emira is acting as both Amity's and Edric's parent. It doesn't seem that way in the earlier episodes, other than the fact she is shown to be the more responsible twin, but because of Odalia's emotionally abusive behavior and Alador's neglect, Emira had to take the role as their caretaker. This role is a huge burden on any child, considering she's only 16 years old and has to deal with her abusive parents in addition to taking care of her two other siblings. Now let's talk about the real monster, Odalia Blight. I am so glad that we all collectively despise her. She deserves it. She's completely out of her mind, with how she grounds her children and employs literal elite guards to make sure 3 teenagers don't leave their rooms. She also broke her daughter's only connection to speak with her girlfriend. She makes her daughter participate in advertising weaponry, expels innocent students from school just to teach her daughter a lesson, purposely endangering a literal 14-year-old, attempting to eliminate a 14-year-old, and finally, assisting a literal genocide that she was fully aware of, and she didn't tell anyone. She is emotionally abusive and projects her idea of a blight onto her youngest daughter without giving Amity a choice. Not to mention, the worst thing she did. Odalia encourages and practically forces Amity to join the Emperor's Coven, or become a coven head. She wanted Amity to get a sigil, despite knowing about the draining spell. The list goes on. She is just a horrible person, it's undeniable. Okay, I am so disappointed in the fandom for one reason. The way so many The Outlaws fans treat Alador. Only because he's goofy and chases butterflies, the fandom treats him like this silly, innocent icon, but he isn't. Anyone who paid attention to him in the show would know he is an abuser. He doesn't directly act as bad as Odalia, but he's letting it happen. Allowing your children to be abused makes you an abuser. But that isn't even the only thing that makes him a terrible father. He neglects his children constantly, so clearly, even though he said he wants to spend more time with his kids. What he's done is unforgivable, and you should all know that he doesn't deserve to be forgiven. Even if he's actively trying to be a better father, we should all still acknowledge his negligence to all of his children. Now, there's one thing I've been dying to talk about ever since the very day For the Future came out. There is a character who's fully alive and well, and there's a conflict that will be faced with this character. We saw them in For the Future, and we all hate them. You guessed it, I'm talking about Odalia Blight. We haven't seen her anywhere in the trailer, but she wasn't in For the Future just for the fandom to hate her more. I mean, kind of. But I know the crew kept her as the collector's apprentice for a different reason. And it's that Amity and Odalia will have a face-off. Amity will have the opportunity to properly confront Odalia, and Amity will take that opportunity. Amity will most likely meet Odalia somewhere in the archive. Odalia will talk down to Amity, which will make Amity furious, but mainly sad, because it's reminding Amity of what it was like to live in the Blight Manor and deal with Odalia's abuse. But this time, when Amity feels small, she will not be alone, like she was all those times throughout her life. This time, Camila is by her side. Camila has been the entire Hick Squad's substitute parent in the human realm, and that also means she was Amity's substitute parent. Camila was the only good grown-up to take care of Amity. And once Camila realizes what a shithead Amity has been dealing with for so long, she will stand up for Amity and encourage the witch to stand up against her abuser. And together, just like a mother and daughter, they defeat Odalia physically or emotionally. I'm hoping for both. That's when Amity's arc comes full circle and she's finally done with her mother's bullshit and can begin forgetting the way she used to feel. You've made it to the end of this video. I really hope you enjoyed it. Let me know how you predict Amity's confrontation with Odalia will play out. But most importantly, If you know someone struggling with being a victim of child abuse, or you yourself suspect or are a victim of child abuse, please talk to a friend or grown-up you trust, or visit your regional child abuse hotline to get help. There is still hope, I promise.